The metal floor felt cold, even through thick boots. Tom Bradley sat quietly in the corner of the transport ship, watching 12 different alien species prepare for what could be their final mission. Some had scales that changed color with their mood. Others had multiple arms that moved in strange patterns. A few breathed different gases and wore special masks over their faces. Tom was the only human on the ship. His simple gray uniform looked plain next to the colorful armor and strange equipment the aliens carried. Many of them had been staring at him for days, whispering in languages he could not understand. Their message was clear even without translation. They thought he would die first. The ship's computer announced their arrival at Arcturus 7. Through the small window, Tom could see nothing but white. Snow and ice covered everything as far as his eyes could reach. The wind outside was so strong, it shook their massive transport ship like a toy. "Final briefing for all contestants," the ship's voice said in the common language all species could understand. "You will be dropped alone on the planet's surface. You have 7 days to build a shelter that can keep you alive. You must also create a signal system so we can find you. Anyone who fails will be removed from the competition." A tall blue alien named Wraith stood up and looked directly at Tom. "The human will not last 1 day in real cold," he said with a laugh. "His species comes from a warm world where water stays liquid. He has no thick fur, no special blood, no way to sleep through the cold like we can." Another alien, this one covered in green scales, nodded his large head. "My people have lived on ice worlds for thousands of years. Our blood does not freeze, even when the air reaches temperatures that would kill most life forms." Tom said nothing. He continued checking his equipment list for the 100th time. While the aliens talked about their natural abilities, Tom had spent the 3-week journey studying everything he could about Arcturus 7. He knew the average temperature, the wind patterns, the locations of underground heat sources, and the chemical makeup of the ice. The blue alien, Wraith, walked over to Tom's seat. "What is in your survival kit, human? Do you have some secret technology that will save you?" Tom opened his pack and showed the contents. "Standard plasma cutter for cutting ice and rock. Emergency food for 10 days. Water purification tablets. Basic medical supplies. Thermal sensor to detect heat sources. Metal wire and tools for construction." The green alien laughed so hard his scales changed from green to bright yellow. "That is all? No heat generator that runs for weeks? No emergency shelter that builds itself? No special suit that keeps you warm for days without power?" "No," Tom said simply. "Just tools." The aliens looked at each other and made sounds that were clearly laughter in their languages. They had expected secret human technology. Instead, Tom carried simple tools that any species could buy at any space station. What they did not know was that Tom had spent 15 years working as an engineer on frontier worlds. He had built shelters on planets where acid rain fell from the sky. He had created air recycling systems in caves where poisonous gas leaked from the rocks. He had designed water collection systems in deserts where no rain fell for years. Humans might not have thick fur or special blood, but they had something else. They could look at any environment and figure out how to change it to meet their needs. Other species adapted their bodies to survive in harsh places over thousands of years. Humans adapted their environment to be comfortable in just days or weeks. The ship's computer began counting down. "Contestant drop sequence begins in 60 seconds. Tom stood up and adjusted his pack. His heart was beating fast, but not from fear. This was the same feeling he got every time he started a new engineering project, the excitement of solving a problem that seemed impossible. "Contestant number 1, prepare for drop." A small alien in a special breathing suit walked to the drop pod. The pod was like a small metal egg that would carry each contestant safely to the planet's surface. Tom watched as the alien climbed inside and the pod was launched toward the white world below. One by one, the aliens entered their pods and were dropped onto Arcturus 7. Each one was confident they would survive. Each one believed their natural abilities would be enough to last 7 days in the killing cold. Finally, only Tom was left. Final contestant, prepare for drop. Tom walked to his pod and climbed inside. The metal walls were already cold from the ship's air conditioning. Once he landed on Arcturus 7, the real cold would begin. The kind of cold that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. The kind of cold that made metal so brittle it could break like glass. The kind of cold that had killed explorers from dozens of different species. As his pod was loaded into the launch tube, Tom closed his eyes and reviewed his plan one more time. While the aliens would try to fight against the cold using their natural abilities, Tom would do something different. He would use the cold as a tool. He would turn the planet's own harsh environment into his greatest advantage. The pod launched with a violent shake that pressed Tom deep into his seat. Through the small window, he could see the white planet growing larger as he fell toward it. Somewhere down there, in that endless field of ice and snow, he would build something that would amaze the aliens who had laughed at his simple tools. The pod's computer announced they were entering the planet's atmosphere. Tom felt the heat from the friction as they punched through the thin air. Soon he would find out if human engineering could beat alien evolution in the ultimate survival test. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, and the temperature readings dropped lower with each passing second. The drop pod hit the ground hard enough to rattle Tom's teeth. Ice and snow exploded in all directions from the impact, creating a crater 3 meters wide. The pod systems flashed red warnings about the outside temperature before the screen. Went dark from the extreme cold. Tom waited 30 seconds for the systems to stabilize, then hit the emergency release button. The pod's door cracked open with a sound like breaking glass. Immediately, air so cold it burned his lungs rushed into the small space. He stepped out onto Arcturus 7 for the first time. The cold was unlike anything Tom had ever experienced. Even through his insulated suit, he could feel it trying to steal the heat from his body. The wind hit him like a physical punch, nearly knocking him off his feet. Ice crystals in the air stung his face through his helmet's visor. Around him, stretched, an alien landscape that looked like the end of the world. The ground was covered in ice so thick and old it had turned blue-green in color. Strange formations of frozen water rose from the surface like twisted sculptures, carved by thousands of years of wind. In the distance, mountains of black rock pierced through the ice like broken teeth. Tom's suit computer showed the current conditions. Temperature, minus 54 degrees and still dropping as the planet moved away from its distant sun. Wind. Speed, 170 kilometers per hour with gusts much stronger. His suit's heating system was already working at maximum power just to keep him alive. He had maybe 6 hours before the next major storm system arrived. After that, the wind speed would increase to levels that could pick up a grown human and throw him against the ice formations hard enough to break bones. Tom pulled his equipment pack from the pod's storage compartment and immediately began moving toward a group of dark rocks he had spotted during his descent. The thermal sensor on his suit showed they might provide some protection from the wind and possibly access to underground heat. Walking on Arcturus 7 was like trying to move through water while wearing heavy weights. The wind pushed against him, constantly, and the ice under his feet was slippery enough that each step required careful balance. Twice, sudden gusts nearly knocked him down, and he had to grab onto ice formations to stay upright. As he struggled toward the rocks, Tom activated his suit's long-range scanner. The device showed him the locations of the other contestants across the frozen wasteland. Most were within 5 kilometers of his position, scattered by the random nature of the drop system. One signal, about 3 kilometers to his east, was already flashing red. Either the contestant was injured, or their equipment was failing in the extreme cold. A second signal seemed to be moving erratically, suggesting someone was lost and wandering in circles. Tom forced himself to ignore the other signals and focus on his own survival. In conditions this harsh, stopping to help others would mean death for everyone involved. It took him nearly 2 hours to reach the rock formations. By the time he arrived, his suit's heating system had drained 15% of its power reserves. At this rate, he would be dead from cold in less than 24 hours unless he found another heat source. The rocks turned out to be even better than he had hoped. 3 massive stone pillars, each taller than a building, formed a natural windbreak. More importantly, his thermal sensor detected heat signatures coming from inside the rocks themselves. Tom used his plasma cutter to clear ice away from what looked like cave openings in the base of the largest pillar. The tool drained precious power from his suit, but it was necessary. Behind a wall of ancient ice, he found exactly what he was looking for. The cave extended about 15 meters into the rock before narrowing to cracks too small for a human to pass through. But those cracks were where the heat was coming from. Deep underground, geothermal energy was warming the rocks and creating pockets of air that were actually above freezing. This was Tom's first advantage. While the alien contestants would try to generate heat using their equipment or natural abilities, Tom had found a location where the planet itself was already providing heat. Now he needed to figure out how to capture and use that energy. He began by using his plasma cutter to shape blocks of ice from the cave entrance. Each block weighed over 100 kilograms, but they were the building material he needed. Unlike the aliens, who might try to melt ice or fight against it, Tom planned to use the ice as insulation and construction material. The work was exhausting. Moving the heavy ice blocks pushed his body to its limits, and the plasma cutter continued, draining power from his suit. But with each block he cut and positioned, Tom was building the foundation of something much more sophisticated than a simple shelter. As the first day ended and Arcturus 7's distant sun disappeared below the horizon, the temperature dropped even further. Tom's suit registered minus 62 degrees outside, with wind gusts reaching 250 kilometers per hour. Inside his partially constructed shelter, however, the temperature was only minus 10 degrees. The ice blocks he had positioned were already trapping warm air from the geothermal vents, creating a space that was warmer than the outside environment. Tom allowed himself a small smile as he worked by the light of his suit's headlamp. The alien contestants were probably huddled around small fires or hiding in their emergency shelters, slowly draining their power supplies. Meanwhile, he was building a system that would actually become more efficient as the outside temperature dropped. Through the howling wind, Tom could hear the distant sound of another emergency beacon activating. One more contestant had given up and called for rescue rather than face another night in the killing cold. Tom continued working, cutting more ice blocks and positioning them according to his mental blueprint. He was not just building a shelter. He was engineering a thermal management system that would use the planet's own energy to keep him comfortable while his competitors slowly froze to death. The real test would come tomorrow, when he began construction of the heating distribution network that would make his shelter not just livable but actually warm. Morning brought no sun to Arcturus 7, only a slightly lighter shade of gray that filtered through the endless storm clouds. Tom woke inside his half-built shelter to find ice crystals covering the inside walls where his breath had frozen during the night. The temperature had dropped to minus 68 degrees outside, but inside his shelter it was only minus 5 degrees. More importantly, his suit's power levels had barely dropped during the night. The geothermal heat coming through the rock cracks had warmed his shelter enough that his suit's heating system only needed to work at minimum power. Tom checked his long-range scanner and found that 3 more emergency beacons had activated during the night. Only 8 contestants remained active, and 2 of those signals were moving very slowly, suggesting their owners were in serious trouble. He allowed himself 10 minutes to eat an emergency food bar and drink some water. Then, got back to work. Today's task was much more complex than simply cutting ice blocks. Today he would build the heating system that would keep him alive for the remaining 5 days of the test. Using salvaged metal from his drop pod, Tom began constructing a network of tubes and channels. The metal was difficult to work with in the extreme cold. It became brittle and sharp, cutting through his insulated gloves when he was not careful. But metal was the only material that could efficiently transfer heat from the geothermal vents to the living spaces he was creating. The design Tom had in mind was based on heating systems he had built on other frontier worlds. Hot air from the geothermal vents would be captured and channeled through metal tubes built into the walls of his shelter. The heated air would warm the entire structure before being vented outside, carrying moisture and carbon dioxide away while bringing in fresh, warm air from the underground sources. As he worked, cutting and bending metal with tools designed for emergency repairs, Tom could hear the wind outside growing stronger. His suit's weather sensors warned that another major storm was approaching. This one would be worse than the previous night, with sustained winds over 300 kilometers per hour and temperatures dropping below -70 degrees. Tom had perhaps 4 hours to complete the basic heating system before conditions became too dangerous for outside work. He pushed himself harder, ignoring the pain in his fingers and the burning in his lungs from breathing the thin, cold air. The first heating tube was the most critical. It needed to connect the deepest geothermal vent with the main living area of his shelter. Tom had to crawl into the narrow cave passages, following the heat signatures with his thermal sensor until he found the warmest spot accessible to his equipment. The vent was exactly what he had hoped to find, a crack in the rock where air heated. By underground thermal activity flowed steadily upward. The air was not hot enough to burn, but it was warm enough to heat his shelter if properly channeled and distributed. Tom positioned the first metal tube to capture this rising warm air and direct it toward his main shelter area. Then he began the delicate work of sealing the connections with salvaged materials to prevent heat loss. As he worked, his suit's emergency radio picked up a transmission from one of the other contestants. It was Wraith, the blue alien who had mocked Tom's simple equipment on the transport ship. "Emergency services, this is Contestant 7. Wraith's voice was weak and filled with pain. "My heating unit has failed. Core temperature dropping rapidly. Request immediate evacuation." Tom paused in his work to listen to the rescue coordination. Another contestant eliminated by the killing cold. That left 7 active signals on his scanner. He continued building his heating system, adding secondary tubes that would distribute warm air to different areas of his expanding shelter. Unlike the aliens, who seemed to be trying to heat their entire environment with portable devices, Tom was building a system that worked with the natural heat flow of the planet. The second major innovation came when Tom realized he could use the ice blocks themselves as part of his heating system. By carving channels into the blocks before positioning them, he could create airways that would carry warm air through the walls of his shelter. The ice would insulate the warm air from the outside cold, while allowing heat to transfer slowly and evenly throughout the structure. By mid-afternoon, as the next storm system began to arrive, Tom had completed the basic framework of his heating system. 3 separate air channels now carried geothermal heat through different areas of his shelter. The main living space was maintaining a temperature of +5 degrees, warm enough that Tom could remove his helmet and breathe the air directly. The storm that hit that evening was unlike anything Tom had experienced. Wind speeds reached 350 kilometers per hour, strong enough to pick up chunks of ice the size of his head and hurl them through the air like bullets. The sound was deafening, like standing next to a rocket engine during launch. But inside his shelter, Tom was not only safe but actually comfortable. His heating system was working better than he had dared hope. The warm air from the geothermal vents was not only heating his shelter, but also providing fresh air to breathe and carrying away moisture that would otherwise freeze and damage his equipment. As the night wore on, Tom continued refining his system. He added more air channels, improved the insulation around the metal tubes, and began construction of what would become his most impressive innovation yet. Using his understanding of airflow and heat transfer, Tom started building a heat recovery system. Instead of simply venting warm air outside after it had heated his shelter, he designed a system that would capture some of that heat and use it to pre-warm incoming fresh air. By dawn of the third day, while his remaining competitors huddled in failing emergency shelters or struggled with power supplies that were nearly exhausted, Tom was working in shirt sleeves inside a shelter that was warmer than many buildings on civilized worlds. His emergency beacon remained silent, while two more contestants activated theirs during the night, unable to survive another day in the planet's brutal environment. Tom looked at his thermal management system with satisfaction. He had not just survived Arcturus 7's killing cold. He had built a home that used the planet's own energy to stay comfortable while the environment outside tried to kill everything that lived. The fourth morning brought news that changed everything. Tom's suit radio crackled to life with an emergency broadcast from the rescue coordinators orbiting high above Arcturus 7. Attention remaining contestants. Severe weather system approaching. From the north. Category 5. Ice storm with sustained winds exceeding 400 kilometers per hour. Temperature projections show minus 80 degrees or lower. This storm will last approximately 36 hours. Any contestant requesting emergency evacuation should activate their beacon immediately. Tom checked his scanner. Only 5 signals remained active, including his own. During the night, 2 more contestants had either died or called for rescue. The blue alien wraith was already gone. The green-scaled creature who had boasted about his species' natural cold resistance had activated his beacon 12 hours earlier. As Tom listened to the emergency broadcast, he realized that this storm would be the real test. The previous weather had been harsh enough to eliminate 7 contestants. This new storm would be strong enough to destroy buildings and kill anyone caught outside, even in the best environmental suits. But Tom was not worried. In fact, he was excited. Over the past 3 days, his shelter had evolved from a simple cave into something remarkable. What had started as a basic windbreak was now a sophisticated thermal management facility that turned Arcturus 7's brutal environment into a comfortable living space. The heating system Tom had built was now operating at peak efficiency. 3 main thermal loops carried geothermal heat through every part of his shelter. The primary loop maintained the main living area at a steady 15 degrees above freezing. The secondary loop heated his workshop area, where he continued building improvements to his system. The third loop was his greatest innovation yet, a heat recovery system that captured warm air from his breathing and recycled it back through the shelter. But Tom's engineering had gone far beyond simple heating. He had also solved the problems of air quality, water supply, and structural integrity that were killing his competitors. The air quality system used the natural airflow from the geothermal vents to provide fresh oxygen while carrying away carbon dioxide and moisture. Unlike the aliens who were slowly suffocating in sealed emergency shelters, Tom had unlimited fresh air that was automatically heated as it entered his shelter. For water, Tom had built a collection system that captured moisture from the geothermal vents and condensed it into clean drinking water. He now had more fresh water than he could use, while his competitors were rationing emergency supplies that would run out within days. The structural integrity of his shelter was perhaps the most impressive achievement. Instead of fighting against the ice and wind, Tom had designed his walls to work with the natural forces of the planet. The ice blocks were arranged in interlocking patterns that actually became stronger when pressed by wind. The metal framework distributed loads efficiently so that increasing wind pressure only made the structure more solid. As the Category 5 storm approached, Tom made his final preparations. He sealed the exterior openings of his shelter with specially shaped ice blocks that would allow airflow while blocking wind and snow. He checked all his heating system connections and made sure his backup systems were ready to activate if needed. Then, He did something that would have seemed impossible to the other contestants. He took off his environmental suit entirely. Inside his shelter, the air was now warm enough that Tom could work comfortably in just his basic clothing. The temperature was holding steady at 18 degrees above freezing, and his heating system was actually producing more heat than his shelter needed. He had been forced to build venting systems to prevent the space from becoming too warm. When the storm hit that evening, it was unlike anything recorded in the planet's history. Wind speeds reached 430 kilometers per hour, strong enough to move boulders and reshape the landscape. The temperature dropped to minus 83 degrees, cold enough to freeze carbon dioxide from the air. The sound was terrifying. Even inside his well-insulated shelter, Tom could hear the planet screaming as winds tore across the ice fields. He could feel the vibrations through the rock as the storm tried to destroy everything in its path. But his shelter held perfectly. The structural design Tom had created was actually strengthened by the increased wind pressure. The ice blocks locked together more tightly, and the metal framework distributed the loads exactly as he had calculated. More importantly, his heating system was working better than ever. The extreme cold outside created a greater temperature, difference between his geothermal heat source and the external environment, which made his heat transfer systems more efficient. His shelter was actually becoming more comfortable as conditions outside became more deadly. During the long night of the storm, Tom received 2 more emergency beacon signals. The remaining contestants, unable to withstand the Category 5 conditions, had given up and called for rescue. That left only Tom's signal active on the scanner. He was now the sole survivor of the Arcturus 7 survival test. As Tom worked on further improvements to his heating system during the storm, he received a message that surprised him. It was from the rescue coordinators, but they were not offering evacuation. Contestant Tom Bradley, this is rescue coordination. We are reading impossible thermal signatures from your location. Our sensors indicate internal temperatures over 20 degrees while external conditions are minus 83. Please confirm your status and equipment condition. Tom smiled as he replied. Rescue coordination. This is Tom Bradley. All systems operating normally. Internal temperature is actually 22 degrees and rising. I may need to add more cooling vents to prevent overheating. There was a long silence before the response came. Contestant Bradley, please repeat. Did you say your shelter is in danger of overheating during a Category 5 ice storm? Confirmed. Rescue coordination. My thermal management system is operating above design specifications. I estimate I could maintain comfortable living conditions indefinitely, regardless of external weather conditions. As the storm continued to rage outside, Tom continued working on his engineering masterpiece. He had not just survived Arcturus 7's killing environment. He had built a system so efficient and sophisticated that he was more comfortable than many people living on civilized worlds with advanced technology. Tomorrow would bring the evaluation team, and Tom would show them something that would change how the galaxy thought about human engineering capabilities forever. The Category 5 storm ended as suddenly as it had begun. By dawn of the 7th day, Arcturus 7's endless winds had dropped to their normal 150 kilometers per hour, and the temperature had risen to what passed for warm on this frozen world, minus 65 degrees. Tom stood outside his shelter in the pale morning light, wearing only his basic thermal clothing while he performed routine maintenance on his heat distribution system. The sight would have been impossible to believe if not for the thermal sensors recording everything from orbit. Around him, the landscape had been completely transformed by the storm. Ice formations that had stood for centuries had been torn apart and scattered. The craters left by other contestants' landing pods were now filled with snow and barely visible. In the distance, the twisted wreckage of an emergency shelter showed what had happened to the last alien who had tried to outlast the storm using conventional survival methods. But Tom's shelter complex had not only survived the storm, it had grown larger. During the long hours of the Category 5 weather, when stepping outside would have meant instant death, Tom had continued construction inside his heated workspace. His shelter now included multiple rooms, a sophisticated air recycling system, a water treatment facility, and backup heating circuits that could maintain comfortable temperatures even if the primary systems failed. The sound of engines broke the morning silence. High above, Tom could see the running lights of a large transport ship descending through the thin atmosphere. The evaluation team had arrived to assess the results of the survival test. Tom activated his communication system and sent a message to the approaching ship. "Evaluation team, this is Tom Bradley. I am ready for your inspection. Please be advised that landing party should dress for -65-degree conditions with high winds." The response came immediately, and Tom could hear the amazement in the voice. "Contestant Bradley, this is Council Chairman Anders. We are reading thermal signatures that indicate your location is warmer than our ship's interior. Please confirm your environmental conditions." "Confirmed, Council Chairman. Current internal temperature is 24 degrees above freezing. I have been forced to add cooling vents to prevent overheating. My geothermal heating system is operating at 130% of design capacity." There was a long pause before the next transmission. "We will land in 15 minutes for full evaluation." Tom used the time to make final preparations. He sealed his workshop area and activated guest heating circuits he had built in case rescue teams needed to warm up during their visit. Then he put on his environmental suit, not because he needed it inside his shelter, but because he would need it to meet the evaluation team outside in the killing cold. The evaluation team's shuttle landed in a cloud of ice crystals about 50 meters from Tom's shelter complex. Through his helmet's visor, Tom watched as 5 figures in heavy environmental suits struggled against the wind to reach his location. The lead figure was clearly having trouble with the extreme conditions. His suit's heating system was running at maximum power, and ice was already forming on his visor from his frozen breath. "Chairman Anders," Tom called over the radio. "Please follow me inside where we can talk more comfortably." Tom led the evaluation team through the main entrance of his shelter. As they passed through the airlock system he had built, their environmental sensors began registering readings that seemed impossible. Chairman Anders was the first to remove his helmet once they were inside the main living area. He was an elderly alien with gray skin and large black eyes that showed his amazement at what he was seeing. "This is remarkable," he said, looking around at Tom's shelter. "The air is not only breathable, it is actually warm and comfortable. How long could this system operate?" "Indefinitely," Tom replied, activating a wall display that showed his thermal management system status. "The geothermal heat source has been stable for thousands of years based on mineral analysis. My system actually becomes more efficient as external temperatures drop because the thermal differential increases." Another evaluation team member, a tall alien with blue skin, was examining the ice block construction of Tom's walls. "These walls show no signs of melting, despite the warm internal temperature. The thermal insulation properties exceed our theoretical models." Tom nodded. "The ice blocks are arranged in a double wall system with controlled air gaps. The warm air circulates through channels carved into the inner walls, but never comes in direct contact with the structural ice. The system maintains perfect temperature control while using the ice as both insulation and construction material." The third team member was studying Tom's air recycling system with obvious amazement. "This facility has cleaner air than most space stations. The carbon dioxide levels are actually lower than standard atmospheric composition." "The geothermal vents provide constant fresh air flow," Tom explained. "I built the system to use that natural air movement to maintain perfect atmospheric conditions. No artificial life support required." Chairman Anders consulted his datapad, which was still displaying readings that seemed to violate the laws of physics. "Contestant Bradley, in 7 days you have built a facility that outperforms installations designed by our most advanced civilizations. Using only basic tools and salvaged materials, you have created a permanent habitat on one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds." Tom shrugged. "Human engineering is not about having the most advanced technology. It is about understanding how natural systems work and building solutions that cooperate with those systems instead of fighting against them. The blue-skinned evaluator was now examining Tom's heat recovery systems. The efficiency ratings are beyond our current theoretical models. How did you achieve this level of performance? Every other contestant tried to overpower this planet's environment using portable heaters and emergency shelters, Tom explained. I built a system that partners with the planet's own energy sources. Instead of fighting against the cold, I use it to increase the efficiency of my heat transfer systems. Chairman Anders looked around the shelter one final time, then made his decision. The research station contract is yours, contestant Bradley. Your species has demonstrated engineering capabilities that will bring new perspectives to our exploration of ancient technologies. As the evaluation team prepared to leave, Tom walked them back through his facility, pointing out systems that would continue operating for months or years after his departure. His geothermal heating network, his air recycling systems, and his water treatment facility would all function automatically, maintaining a comfortable living environment in the middle of one of the galaxy's most hostile environments. The other contestants, Chairman Anders asked as they reached the exit airlock. They all possessed natural adaptations or advanced technology designed for extreme cold survival. How did you succeed where they failed? Tom looked back at his shelter complex, then out at the frozen wasteland where 11 other contestants had given up or died trying to survive. They tried to adapt themselves to survive in this environment, Tom said. Humans take a different approach. We adapt the environment to be suitable for us. Given enough time and the right tools, we can make any world into a comfortable home. As the evaluation team's shuttle lifted off and disappeared into Arcturus 7's gray sky, Tom stood outside his shelter for a few more minutes, enjoying the accomplishment. Somewhere far above, the galaxy was about to learn what human engineering could achieve when survival was not enough, when they demanded comfort, efficiency, and permanence from the most impossible places. The research station contract was just the beginning. Tom had shown that humans could not only survive in hostile environments, they could thrive in them, building systems that turned deadly worlds into comfortable homes using nothing more than intelligence, determination, and the engineering principles that had carried humanity to the stars.